My missing husband was found in an unbelievable place. I want you to listen to what happened. By the way, it was thanks to my daughter that he was found. It's also a very mysterious story. First of all, let's start with our coloring. It was at work that I met my husband Marcus. We joined the company in the same department at the same time. Marcus and I hit it off right away, and I confessed. At that time, Marcus had just been dumped by his former girlfriend, and he was like, "I don't feel like going out with anyone right now," but I forcibly turned him around. Now that I think about it, I think it was a pretty aggressive way. To be honest, Marcus was quite a type, and if I missed this opportunity, I knew that I couldn't get married. Even though we started dating aggressively, we were pretty compatible and looked like a married couple for years. After 5 years of dating, Marcus proposed to me and we got married. I immediately headed to Marcus's parents' house to talk to them about our marriage. It was his mother who greeted me first. We met for the first time, but she welcomed me warmly. A few years ago, Marcus told me that they were a single-mother family, so I didn't feel anything was wrong. My mother-in-law is very easy to talk to, and I thought Marcus's kindness must have been influenced by her. When Marcus reported that he was getting married, she cried with joy. That's really good. Looking at his mother-in-law crying and saying that, Marcus had a somewhat complicated look on his face. Then I had a drink with my mother-in-law while talking about various things. When it comes to dramas, I thought it would be exciting to see pictures of Marcus when he was small, but not one picture from the past came up. Well, I guess so. Thinking so, I went home that day. We were still in our 20s when we got married, and we didn't have a wedding party because we didn't have enough money. I was thinking that if I had the money to get married, would use it for the sake of the child that would be born someday. But after I got married, I hardly had any children. It wasn't until 5 years after we got married that I found out I was pregnant. It was a time when both Marcus and I had given up, so I was so happy. I thought about the name and went shopping for clothes, and everything was fun. I'm going to work hard. I'll do my best to cook better. We used to say that to each other. Marcus took out a rather expensive life insurance policy in case something happened to him. It's true that if something happened to Marcus, it would be a big problem, and I was thinking that I was going to become a parent like this. Anyway, we were so happy, and I thought this happiness would last forever. However, such a happy life did not last long. A few months later, my daughter was born safely, and one day, while I was busy raising my child, Marcus suddenly disappeared. One day, I'm going to run for a while. That's what he was supposed to say when he went running on his usual jogging course. But on that day, he didn't come back even after 2 or 3 hours, though he usually comes back in 1 hour. Where has he gone? Thinking so, I contacted Marcus, but I don't know if his smartphone was turned on or not, but I can't get through to him. Just in case, I contacted my mother-in-law to confirm, but apparently he hasn't gone back to his parents' home. This has never happened before, so I had a bad feeling about it. I was looking after my daughter and waiting for his return, but I couldn't get in touch with his. It was 9 p.m. before I knew it. It's definitely strange. He might have been involved in an accident. I thought so, so I left my daughter with my mother-in-law and went to the police to ask for a search. Although his mother-in-law was worried about Marcus, she said, "It's too much to take care of your daughter just with you, so you should stay at my house." She said that. I took her up on her kind offer and stayed at her house. By this time, I was taking it easy. I'll hear from him the next day. But I didn't hear from Marcus the next day. I was so worried that I took my daughter and looked everywhere for her. I asked the hospital and the police, but I couldn't find anyone who looked like Marcus. Where did he go? If he lost his life in an accident or got involved in a crime, I would have felt better knowing the reason. But Marcus suddenly disappeared for no reason, so I couldn't understand. Every day, I was thinking, why? And maybe he hurt himself raising a child. In fact, he went to see his affair partner. I had a lot of imagination. Marcus wasn't the kind of person to do that, but I was cornered to that extent. 1 month passed without Marcus being found. My mother-in-law and I were completely exhausted from the situation where we had no idea if he was alive or dead. But my mother-in-law was so concerned about me that she said, "Stay at home until your daughter enters elementary school." She looked after me like that. One day, when I put my daughter to bed, I was eating sweets and talking with my mother-in-law. Then, all of a sudden, she started talking about unbelievable things. "Amanda, actually, there's something I haven't told you." "What? What happened?" "Actually, I'm not Marcus's mother." "What?" I was so surprised that I couldn't help shouting, but I decided to hear the details. To be exact, my mother-in-law was Marcus's actual mother's sister. Marcus's mother, Isabella, had always been a troublemaker, and apparently she was arrested because of that. She hadn't thought about Adiron at all, and had almost given up on raising a child. Anyway, Marcus's father hasn't been identified yet. It seems that my mother-in-law happened to see Marcus being abused when he was 8 years old. I knew she hated children, but I never thought she'd raise her hand. So I decided to take Marcus. My mother-in-law adopted Marcus, and the two have been living together ever since. My mother-in-law wasn't married, but she was laughing that she suddenly became the mother of an 8-year-old boy. My mother-in-law was a nurse, so she made him feel lonely when she was busy with work, but I think she raised him with a lot of love. She said that Marcus, who had a gloomy expression at the beginning, gradually became cheerful. Even if you are not related by blood, I think you're Marcus's mother. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. But I have something on my mind. Actually, the day before Marcus disappeared, Isabella visited my mother-in-law. It was the first time in 10 years for my mother-in-law to see Isabella, and until then, she did not know where Isabella had been and could not contact her. Her hair was messy, her clothes were dirty, and she looked like a bum. She was so transformed that my mother-in-law didn't know who it was at first. My sister only gets in touch with me when she needs money. But I knew I had to give up. Marcus is happy to be married. As expected, she begged Isabella for money, but she refused with a firm attitude. "I'm telling you I don't have any money for you. Get out of here right now." So please, just $1,000. I'll double it and give it back to you. Right? Please. We're just two sisters. Let's help each other out in a time like this. Come on, now. I don't think you're family. Just go away. If you say so, I'll have to ask Marcus next time. It's none of your business about Marcus. He's already married and living happily ever after, so leave him alone. Isabella smirked at my mother-in-law, who blurted out about Marcus, and then she went away. Marcus disappeared soon after that, didn't he? I thought maybe my sister had something to do with it. Amanda, just in case, could you go and see the house where my sister lived? Then I was told where Isabella and Marcus lived, and I went to look for any clues. The house where Isabella and Marcus lived was originally the parents' house of my mother-in-law and Isabella. After her parents passed away, Isabella decided to live. It turned out that the address my mother-in-law gave me had a horror movie ruin and no one had lived there for years. Isabella might be here. I expected it, but it didn't seem like it. Did Marcus grow up here? When I was thinking about that, I started to feel strange. Just being there made me feel like I was about to be haunted, so I was pretty scared, but just in case, I went around the house to make sure nothing happened, and I went back to my mother-in-law. We then tried to find Marcus somehow, soliciting information by making posters and posting on various bulletin boards. Even so, 6 years passed before I knew it, with no information collected. 6 years after Marcus's disappearance, my daughter had entered elementary school. At first, my mother-in-law was like, "Until your daughter enters elementary school." But now she can't let go of the cuteness of her grandchild. I was also relieved that my mother-in-law was helping me. So, I decided, let's live together like this, and we started to live together in earnest. There was no Marcus, but the three of us, my mother-in-law and my daughter, lived happily every day. When my daughter was in kindergarten, there were times when I was in trouble because she would cry, "Why don't I have a dad?" But as she grew older, my daughter seemed to understand somehow. My daughter is a very kind girl like Marcus, so I think she would not ask me about her father in order not to make me sad. For the sake of my daughter, I wanted to find Marcus quickly. It was one day, when I was thinking about that our family situation changed. My daughter was visiting a close friend on her way home from school. Her friend's house was a little far from ours, and it took a long time to walk home. It was raining that day, so I went to pick up my daughter by car. I went home with my daughter, who said goodbye to her friend and got into the car. Somehow I felt like I was going to take a different route home, so I decided to take a different route. When I was driving for a while, I saw a house that looked familiar. Is here? Yes, it was Isabella's house that my mother-in-law told me about before. It was even more ruined than when I came here 6 years ago, and part of the roof had collapsed. If this goes on, it looks like it's going to collapse. What an old house. It's a wreck. When I passed the house, my daughter was looking at the ruins and mumbling. My daughter must have been surprised because she has never seen such ruins. For my daughter, it's where her dad used to live. But I decided not to tell my daughter because I thought it would only confuse her. The next moment, she said something unbelievable. "Hey, Mom. There's my dad." "What? Dad?" I was so surprised that I slammed on the brakes. When I look around, I don't see any sign of Marcus. I couldn't believe what my daughter suddenly said. "What are you saying, Dad?" "Yes, indeed, there is my dad." My daughter said so and pointed to the garden of Isabella's house. "What? What do you mean?" "I'm saying that my dad is here." When I heard those words, I felt a chill running down my spine. Because she's pointing to the ground in the garden, and being there means he's buried. In the garden of Isabella's house, the ground was paved with concrete, unlike when she came 6 years ago. I couldn't help but wonder if Marcus was buried. Why? Normally, I would say, "That's what a kid says," and ignore it. But I knew my daughter was inspired. My daughter was born with that kind of ability, and she surprised my mother-in-law and me by saying surprising things once in a while. When my father died 2 years ago, my daughter was still staring at the corner of the room during the funeral. "What's wrong?" When I asked her, she pointed to the corner of the room and said, "Mom, Grandpa is over there." "What?" Of course I looked in the corner of the room, but there was no sign of anything. My daughter seemed to see my late father. Children sometimes seem to have that kind of presence, and I've come to recognize my daughter's abilities before I knew it. I've known so much about my daughter's abilities that I felt it was true that he was on the ground. So, what did Dad say? He told me to come and get him as soon as possible because he was lonely. "Let's go and get him." Oh, no. Feeling scared, sad, and puzzled, I rushed home and told my mother-in-law what had happened. My mother-in-law knew about my daughter's inspiration, so she immediately believed me. "If your daughter's story is true, does that mean Marcus is buried in the garden of that house?" "No, not really. It seems so. I'll have to check it one time." Actually, my mother-in-law has held the ownership of that ruin for 1 year. Because Isabella was behind on her fixed asset tax, she was on the verge of seizing the property, and apparently my mother-in-law changed her name. Even though it was in ruins like that, she couldn't overlook it because she had memories of spending time at her parents' house. Since the house is owned by my mother-in-law, I had no hesitation in digging the ground in the garden. I took a set of tools, and as I was thinking about where to start, I noticed something. It was laid out in the garden. The concrete was only in one part, not the entire garden. Maybe he's here. One of my mother-in-law's acquaintances had an electric hammer, so I asked him to help me shave the concrete in the garden. If something strange came out when I was scraping the concrete. Just thinking about it made my heart pound. I was in trouble if something happened, so I decided to ask my mother-in-law's acquaintances to leave as soon as they scraped the concrete. Removing the broken concrete and digging the ground little by little. Only I was doing it, so it took a lot of time and we didn't make much progress. It was getting dark, and when I was about to leave, there was something white buried in the ground. As I carried on frantically, what appeared there was no doubt a human bone. I managed to put up with the screams, but I lost my footing and sat down. I decided to contact my mother-in-law right away and ask her to call the police. A few minutes later, the police arrived and set up a security cordon around the house, and I was questioned. Soon my mother-in-law would come and check the bone that came out. "You're kidding. You're really buried." My mother-in-law and I hugged each other and cried. I didn't want my daughter to see anything like this, so I decided to leave her with my parents at home. The bones found were immediately sent to forensic analysis and found to belong to Marcus. If Marcus was found here, Isabella must have been involved. My mother-in-law contacted Isabella right away. When she changed the name of the house 1 year ago, my mother-in-law had asked for Isabella's contact information just in case. I never thought it would work in this way. Although we couldn't get in touch with Isabella, the police started their investigation right away. I was in a daze for a while, with the happiness that Marcus had finally been found, and the loneliness that I had felt that he was not alive. Somewhere in my heart, I was hoping that he would be alive and enjoying his life. My mother-in-law and I decided to go home for a break one time. The interrogation was very long, and my mother-in-law and I were exhausted. I just didn't want to talk about Marcus. We just watched the news on TV without talking. That's when the breaking news came in. This is an emergency report. There was an accident earlier at a construction site near the ABC station. An iron pole fell down. A passerby seems to be trapped under it, and a rescue operation is currently underway. There seems to be a passerby trapped under it, and rescue operations are being carried out now. An accident caused by a falling iron pole. That's scary. There's a lot of traffic down there. As we were talking about it, my mother-in-law got a call from the police. What? Really? My mother-in-law, who answered the phone, was looking at me with a pale face. What happened to you? When I spoke to my mother-in-law, who had hung up the phone, I was told an unbelievable fact. There was an accident on the news earlier, and my sister was involved. Apparently, she was taken to the hospital and found out where she was, and it seemed that my mother-in-law had been contacted. I'm just going to the hospital. Like this, my mother-in-law went to the hospital. I thought I'd go with you, but my mother-in-law refused. I'm sure she couldn't match me to someone who might have killed Marcus. My mother-in-law came home sooner than I expected. Apparently she was in worse condition than she had imagined, and her doctor said she would be disabled below the neck. With 100 kilograms of iron poles falling down from above, I was convinced that it was in such a state. My sister hasn't regained consciousness yet. The doctor said she's over the hump. But I guess we'll just have to wait. Then Isabella regained consciousness 3 days later. The police took action immediately and questioned Isabella about Marcus. Apparently she confessed to the crime more easily than we expected. It seemed that she would be arrested after she recovered her strength. I received a call from the police and headed to the hospital this time. Isabella in the hospital room was looking at the ceiling. When we entered the hospital room, she turned her head this way. What is it, you? Or who is that? This is Marcus's wife, Amanda. About Marcus, is that true? It's no use lying about it. Why did you do that? Marcus was living a happy life. When my mother-in-law shouted, Isabella snapped back and shouted even louder. That's why I'm so disgusted. I don't want him to be the only one who's happy. The world isn't that easy. With such a selfish excuse, my mother-in-law and I couldn't believe our ears. Generally, when a mother is in trouble with money, the son should help me. But he didn't give me any money, and he told me not to contact him anymore. That's why I got stung. Well, even if I get arrested, I don't have a problem because my boyfriend will hire a good lawyer. Nonsense. I'm the one who shouted here. I really couldn't forgive what Isabella said, and before I knew it, I was screaming in the hospital room. A scum like you has no reason to be a mother. Marcus's mother is my mother-in-law. For such a reason, you're a murderer. I feel better now that you can't move your body. Then, when Isabella heard those words, she suddenly looked pale. What? Wait a minute. What do you mean I can't move? She looked quite upset, her eyes rolling. What? Didn't you hear anything? You can't move from the neck down. What? You're kidding. The doctor told me not to move my limbs because I'm injured. Can't I move them for the rest of my life? Haven't you noticed? Your arms and legs are weak. That's how it is. At my mother-in-law's words, Isabella tries to move her arms and legs. But her hands and feet wouldn't move, and I guess she just realized what's wrong with her. You're lying. I can't believe I'm bedridden. Isabella went crazy and suddenly started screaming. I guess she couldn't accept reality that much. A nurse came immediately and was giving her medicine to calm her down. We had more things to tell Isabella, but for now, we left the hospital. The police investigation turned up a few things. It is said that the person who stabbed Marcus was Isabella, and a man who seemed to be Isabella's lover helped her to bury him in the garden. Isabella said he was her lover, but the man denied the relationship, saying, "We just know each other." Of course the man didn't hire a lawyer, and Isabella ended up behind a wall for murder. She's been arrested many times, so she won't be back for a while. I mean, she's more likely to end her life there. It seems that my mother-in-law went to see her, but Isabella was filled with hopelessness and she was so old that I thought she was a different person for a moment. I hope she'll be sorry for what she's done. So, it left me with a bit of a bad impression, but thank you for listening to me until the end. I won't forgive Isabella, but I've decided to be happier for Marcus. I hope the three of us, my mother-in-law, daughter and I, will be able to enjoy our lives more than ever.